Is it time for Guild Wars 3? In a move that's starting to sound very familiar with these publicly traded companies, we're getting confirmations from investor calls about upcoming games, and that's what just happened with NCSoft and Guild Wars 3. Yes, they announced, in a way, I mean, not really announced like a full announcement to all of us, something that we're getting just because, well, someone reported on it from the investor call, but we're getting a Guild Wars 3, whether we like it or not. And while that is the headline, I think there's something else that needs to be covered in this besides just the, oh, we're getting a new MMO part of it. I think it's actually potentially a bit more interesting. Now, all of this is going to be very similar to the investor call, which confirmed EverQuest 3 was in their plans, but also that the development of EverQuest 3 was really, the ideation wouldn't even start until 2025 at the earliest, and that's if it happens. Though they also wanted to release that game by 2028, which is ridiculously short dev time. We even got a budget for it, which was 30 million plus for making the new version of the storied MMO. And that was about it. That was all the information we got on an EverQuest 3. But all that little detail we got about EverQuest 3, it's actually more detail than we got about what Guild Wars 3 was. We have no timelines, we have nothing, we have no budget, nothing about it. We just have an announcement that it was going forward and is currently in development, not being planned, that they're currently working on it. Now, at this point, this investor call has gone through several sources. First, of course, is the investor call, which was in Korean, followed by a Korean language website, InVen, reporting on the shareholders meeting, and then translated by a Redditor, and, well, Google Translate, which is often quite shit. So we have to take a lot of this with a grain of salt. It was then, of course, reported by other Western outlets like Kotaku, which was a primary source for this video, along with InVen. If you happen to read Korean, however, I have included the link down below to InVen, the original site that has the transcript of the shareholders call. This confirmation about Guild Wars 3 came from NCSoft's CEO, talking about the meaningful IP that ArenaNet has with Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2, and stating that they are now making Guild Wars 3. Depending on where you fall on this is either a source of great excitement because, yay, a new MMO from a company that's not shit. I mean, NCSoft, yeah, but ArenaNet has actually proven to be a very solid company for making MMOs over the last couple years, last decade plus. But the other side of that might be a bit of sadness because when you have an upcoming sequel that is usually going to cannibalize a little bit from the previous game, not necessarily just about player base, but cannibalizing development time and focus. And so I think that's a bit of a concern for a lot of players, considering that Guild Wars 2 at this point is only 12 years old. And yeah, I know 12 years old sounds like a lot for any game, but for an MMO, that's actually like the stage where a lot of them are kind of like in their stride. They have a ton of content and have got a good flow with creating new content. Considering that most of the biggest MMOs, the top 5 biggest MMOs, are between over 20 years old, like World of Warcraft, or over 10 years old, like Guild Wars 2, ESO, Lord of the Rings Online, which I don't even know if that's still top 5, or EVE Online, or Final Fantasy XIV. And this is all, of course, with Guild Wars 2 recently having kind of a stellar point of a couple really good expansions over the last couple of years. Expansions that really pulled players in. And, you know, like fun things that they added that were so good that World of Warcraft even put them in their own Dragonflight expansion. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to, like, it's just funny how similar they are. All art is iteration, though. Guild Wars 2 stands as one of the best MMORPGs out there for the value with its buy-to-play model, with their optional in-game store, which is largely focused on cosmetics. But given all of this, of all the MMOs you might want a fresh sequel for, Guild Wars 2 might not be the one, given its current success and development cycle. But it is important to remember that MMOs take a very long time to develop, so we're probably still looking at years of dev time. After all, NCSoft's current MMO that they're about to launch in the West, maybe sometime we have a new test coming out, although it has an NDA, which is kind of weird, given that it's already released in Korea. But the new version of Throne Liberty took 12 years for them to make. So it could be a while. And NCSoft at this point has not publicly stated anything about this game, they haven't added it, like had any update or any kind of trailers or any kind of game details. So I think we're still good for a while. I would be surprised if we hear anything on this for a couple years. Although I've been surprised before. But that's not what was so interesting about this to me. Not just, I mean, okay, yeah, so announcing a new freaking MMO is really exciting for me, and I would have made the video regardless. But there's more details we got about not just Guild Wars, but about ArenaNet and how things are going for them that were in the investor call. The question that ended up with the Guild Wars 3 reveal was actually about NCSoft West and why for the past 8 years, they have been running at a deficit, actively asking why the person in charge had not been replaced yet. This is what the NCSoft CEO had to say. The issue of NC West deficit is not just about numbers. Personally, I've been a director of NCSoft for 17 years, and I've seen that NC West has gone through a lot of reorganization. Originally, we had 6 studios in the US, and we had to consolidate them into what is now ArenaNet, which added costs. But in the end, it became a competitive ArenaNet. It's not a loss, it's a contribution to making us more competitive in the US. ArenaNet has a meaningful IP called Guild Wars, and it went through Guild Wars 2 and is now making Guild Wars 3. If you look at the process, it's quite competitive. It's not completely profitable, but I evaluate that it has grown its competitiveness. There is a lot to unpack here. First, that Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2 aren't completely profitable, but they are at least growing in competitiveness, or at least ArenaNet is growing in competitiveness in its current market. And this is of course an investor talk, so you know what, the interests of the investors and the developers and the players, you know, there's something about that I think their interests may not necessarily be completely and utterly aligned. I don't know why. I don't know what things could make me possibly think that over the last couple years. But it does at least sound like NCSoft is willing to just continue to support NCSoft and sees them going in the right direction as far as competitiveness, even if monetarily it may not be working out yet. But it does beg a question, and that's a question that again goes back to those investors and their needs, right? It goes back to that. Because NCSoft recently has been leaning into a, let's call it a different payment model for their MMOs. Throne and Liberty, for example, is going to have a season, and that seems like, and that's a season in the Western market that they're going to have. And so it kind of makes you wonder, with Guild Wars 3 in development, is there a possibility that this iteration of Guild Wars would have a different model? A model that is trying to get a little bit more of that profit after running so long at a deficit. I'm hoping it doesn't happen, but I could very easily see NCSoft putting some pressure to add a season into a Guild Wars title the way that they have with their other MMOs. We'll just have to wait and see if we get a Guild Wars that is buy to play with a cosmetic shop, or if we get a Guild Wars that is buy to play with a cosmetic shop and a season pass. It also makes me wonder though, like how much of the deficit is caused by ongoing development of expansions and things for Guild Wars 2, as well as the development costs of a new MMO, because the development costs of a new MMO are going to be huge, especially up front with, you know, not making any money on it until later. So there's a whole lot of questions that we don't have answers, and honestly, I don't really care as long as the microtransactions aren't shit and the game itself is good. That's really what it comes down to. But I want to end this on something more positive than talking about, you know, season passes. So I want to ask you, if you were in charge, if you were the one making Guild Wars 3, what would you put in the game? What features would you really want? What races and classes would you want in the game? What areas of the world would you want in a Guild Wars 3? That is, if you're excited about the game, about the potential. Alternatively, if you're not excited about it, what are some things that you really love currently about Guild Wars 2? And you know, to kind of like just continue this positivity, I actually covered Guild Wars 2 and some of the success it was going through in a video quite some time ago, so give me some grace on that, please, because it's I'd like to think I've improved these videos since then, but I did it in this video right here, and you can go check it out. And that's why Guild Wars 2 is not dead, and still isn't today. It's actually getting a new expansion, and maybe a third game. My name is Redwood Flame. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. This, to me, is positive news in a way, except that this is, again, NCSoft being the one who's making more MMOs. Always, but at least ArenaNet's there.